guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name's Ariella. I'm a first-year medical student and I make videos about medical school, lifestyle, education. Today, I mentioned in a previous video on how I studied for finals week that I wanted to talk about my stress management techniques because I feel like it's something that I've really perfected over the years. Is this crooked? So I thought I would just tell you a little bit about how I manage my stress.
Okay, so really quickly, a little disclaimer. In this video, I use the wording if you feel anxious, but specifically not anxiety, because if you have an anxiety disorder, I think that the best course of action would be to manage that with a medical professional.
And some of these are more specific to medical school, some of them are kind of related to just education in general. So I think it's important to talk a little bit about my history with managing my stress in my education. So in high school, I was honestly never really that stressed at all. High school was pretty easy for me, and even though I did spend a lot of hours on homework based on like the amount of homework our school gave us, I never really found it to be that much of a struggle. So I wasn't that stressed over school material in high school. When I got to college, the first couple semesters were pretty good for me. I was kind of riding off the fact that I had taken AP classes in the past, and so I had been introduced to a lot of this information before, and that just tends to make things easier. I'm a little too hot. We're gonna take this off. When I got to second year of college, that's when things started to go downhill, and if you've stuck around since like the very early stages of my channel, you know that organic chemistry was a big struggle for me. And part of the reason that it was is because I had no idea how to handle the immense amount of stress, and I didn't have a good time management technique. That's largely what I attribute my struggle in organic chemistry to, because now I retook organic chemistry after I graduated, and the material was easy. It wasn't that difficult. I think the majority of my struggle with organic chemistry the first time around was my stress management. As we've discussed before, once I figured that out in undergrad, I did so much better and I was so much happier. So definitely utilize the resources that are given to you. I made that mistake. I never really went to a TA's office. I never went to stress management workshops or anything. I never learned how to manage my time. I kind of just jumped into it and figured it all out on my own, which, to be honest, I would not recommend. There are resources in college there for a reason. It's tempting to want to say, oh, I can do this by myself, I don't need anyone else, but I would say that is a faulty way to approach your situation, because there are tons of people who have gone through exactly what you've gone through, and why not use those resources? In my opinion, saying that this is just something that I want to struggle through on my own and I want to figure it out myself and I don't want to rely on anyone else is a cop-out for not actually learning how to cope with what you're going through. And it can be really hard to admit that you've made a dumb mistake and now you can't go back and fix it and you need help. So I understand why people struggle, because I went through the exact same thing and that was my exact mindset the whole time. So don't be like me. Don't be stubborn. That's a little background on me and my history with stress. There were times where I was so stressed out in college that I couldn't do anything, which would allow the work to pile up more, which would make me more stressed, which would paralyze me even further. So it's kind of like a snowball effect, and if you don't get it under control, it can really take you over. I'm gonna talk about my stress management techniques that I recommend you try out if you're a first-year medical student. Okay, so I think the first mistake that people make in general is overdoing it on the caffeine. In general, people are okay, you know, a cup of coffee is not gonna hurt you, but a lot of people drink so much caffeine to stay up and study all day and night, and I think that hurts people more than they realize, because if you're predisposed to feeling anxious and stressed, caffeine is only gonna make it worse. You know, we know that caffeine causes feelings of anxiety, so I would either limit yourself to like 2 cups of coffee a day or 1 cup of coffee a day, depending on what it makes you feel like, or try and switch to tea or something like that. But you know, don't rely on caffeine to help your study techniques, because that just leads down an unfortunate road. Kind of a small tip. So my next tip is, if you're in medical school and you have just taken an exam, book it the heck off campus. Don't talk to anyone. Don't talk about the exam. Make sure you've had time to decompress before you decide, if you decide to discuss the exam with someone. Because what happens is our brains are predisposed to focus on negative information. I don't know if you've noticed that, but the media is always negative. Reviews are always negative because we are genetically and evolutionarily predisposed to focus on that negative information, because negative things are the things that are going to kill us back when we were trying to survive out in the wild. It makes sense that we would focus on things that were dangerous because those were a genuine threat, versus things that are positive, make us happy, but aren't a life-threatening kind of situation. So when you get out of your exam, this happens to me all the time. If I stick around on campus, I discuss what was on the exam with people, and I'm like, oh, okay, I got that one wrong. Oh, okay, I got that one wrong. Okay, I got that right. Okay, I got that question wrong. And so now that's 3 out of 4 questions that I've gotten wrong. We haven't discussed the entire test, so I have no idea how I've actually performed, but because 75% of the questions we discussed I got wrong, I now feel crappy about the exam. Some people love to discuss exams afterwards, and that is just not me. I need to get out of there because otherwise I will feel stressed until the exam results come out. And finishing an exam should be like a euphoric experience. You did it. You studied this information. You got through. Who cares what your grade is? You should enjoy that time before the grade comes out. So the next thing that's specific to med school is to realize that, and it definitely applies to college as well, is one bad grade is not gonna hurt you at all. Nobody's gonna care that I got a C in organic chemistry. Nobody's gonna care that I got like X grade on my 3rd anatomy test. Everyone struggles with different subjects in medical school, and it took me a long time to realize that in relation to anatomy. I went into anatomy riding off the high I had from the previous semester from doing well. I thought I was gonna crush it, and I got absolutely destroyed in the beginning because I didn't know how to study for anatomy, and in general, it's just not my subject. And that was hard for me to accept, coming from an educational background where I needed to excel in everything. Just focus on your strengths and try your best. Everyone's gonna be different, and stay in your own lane. People say this all the time. They said it all the time during orientation, and I was like, whatever, I don't know what that means, I don't care. Comparing yourself to others in medical school is one of the most damaging things you can do, because like I said, everyone has different strengths. There is literally no way that I'm going to be as good at anatomy as somebody who took anatomy previously is, because they've seen the information, they've memorized the information in the past. I'm just not going to be as good as them. So I can do my best, and that's where your true growth comes from, when you stop comparing yourselves to other people and you just work on yourself. Kind of in that same ballpark, try not to forget that doing average on a medical school exam is really, really good, because you're in a group of people that were handpicked for being the top of their academic class, and now you're average among the top of your academic class. That's crazy. I think, again, because getting into med school is so difficult, you need to be at the top of your game at all times. We intertwine our self-worth with how we perform academically. And so now when you get to med school, you're performing average in a group of people who are all really smart. You believe that you are somehow less because you're not doing as well as you were before. And that's absolutely not the case. The next thing, which I mentioned in productivity tips before, is to make sure that you're taking care of your own mental health. Whether that means utilizing mental health resources on campus, I promise your med school has them, because med school is a tough place and it would be ridiculous if they didn't. So utilize mental health resources that your school provides you, utilize outside mental health resources. It could even be as small as just doing something that you enjoy every day. But taking care of your mental health is so important, because it's easy to get bogged down in just the absolute rigor of the academics. I firmly maintain that if all you're doing is studying, then you're doing med school wrong. This, of course, is not considering dedicated boards time in which all you do is study. That's acceptable. But first year, when you're just getting into it, you want to do things that you enjoy. Along that same line, get involved in things on campus. Being involved in groups and clubs on campus is such a vital part of the medical school experience, and it really helps to kind of take this negative cloud away from the campus, because if all you do is study there all the time, then you kind of will get this aversion to school. I don't personally feel that because I love my campus, but I think part of that is that I'm in an a cappella group and we practice for an hour once a week, and just that hour really helps make my day so much better. Another thing that you can do is try to save some time each week to do something fun away from medical school. So usually I'll try and save myself a day. A day didn't really work out in anatomy just because there was so much information that I kind of needed to be studying every day. But when I was in the cellular class, I could save myself a day and just go home for the weekend and use that day to spend with my family. But then the next day I would get back on it and study while I was at home. Another thing that I like to do is save that day for like trips out with my friends or with my boyfriend, or something to do like in Philadelphia that isn't school. So if you're on campus and you're starting to feel overwhelmed studying with your peers, I highly recommend to just move your study space somewhere else. So sometimes studying with other med students can be a positive thing because you see them working diligently, and so it motivates you to work diligently as well. But if you're in a negative headspace before you even come to study with them, seeing them being productive when you can't motivate yourself to be productive can actually be very damaging and make you feel worse. So if you're in that negative headspace and you can't feel like you can get anything done and you're comparing yourself to your friends who are doing so well, get out of there. Just move your study space somewhere else where there aren't other medical students. Maybe get yourself a cubicle where you can be on your own and nobody's talking to you, or leave the campus entirely. Okay, I think I've talked about this before as well, but I would recommend trying to keep your relaxation space and your study space separate. I know that a lot of med students take out loans, and obviously we're not living extravagantly, so a lot of students can't afford to have a bedroom and a study space, so those end up being the same room. For me, it's that way. You've seen my bed and my desk are right next to each other, but I always do work at my desk and I always do relaxation in my bed. I never bring my work to my bed, and that's because I want to have a space to escape to, even in my tiny room, where I don't have to think about work, so that I can refresh myself and then move on. This just helps you compartmentalize the different areas of your life where you can be productive and where you can relax, and I think that's really helpful. I know a lot of people that do study in their bed and they have no issues, but I think if you're predisposed to feeling stressed and you study in your room all the time, eventually you're gonna feel stressed in your room all the time because you're gonna feel like you should be studying all the time, if that makes sense. Another thing I would do is take advantage of mentorship opportunities that come to you during medical school, whether that be from faculty or upperclassmen or like guidance counselors, whatever it may be. I highly recommend you take advantage of those opportunities. I've found that at my school, a favorite hobby of the upperclassmen is to give lowerclassmen unsolicited advice. And I say that unsolicited has like a negative connotation. I'm not trying to be negative at all, but you will feel overwhelmed your first couple weeks with the amount of resources that both the administration and especially the second years give you. And that's a good thing. You don't have to feel like you're tied down to everything that they give you. Test it out in the beginning and see what you like, and then move on and use only what you like. But like they say, everybody studies different in medical school and everybody uses different resources, so you need to find what works for you, and the fact that the M2s are giving you such a plethora of resources is really a good thing. You just need to take the time to figure out what you like. Another thing that I found really helpful is one of my roommates is an M2, so if I ever have any questions about like how things work in the administration, or what a particular professor is like, or how I should study for X exam, she's always happy to give me recommendations on what I should do, and I find that really helpful. So my last tip is a little controversial, but I would say, based on my current experience, which is only 2 out of 3 trimesters of first year, is don't study, or at least don't put so much stress on boards your first year. So that means don't kill yourself over COMLEX and step 1 when you're in your first year of medical school. And so here's my justification. That doesn't mean don't study at all. What I would recommend is to trust your faculty and trust your administration. Know that they're going to give you the concepts that are high yield for boards, in addition to any other information they think you need to know as a future physician. Review that information And when it comes time to study for boards, you'll be able to pull that information from your lecture material while also synthesizing it with boards prep. I think it's important to do active reviewing throughout your entire career as a first-year medical student, but I don't necessarily think it's important to specifically study boards materials because it can be so difficult to juggle both boards material and lecture material, because I've found that my lecture material isn't always exactly boards based. Sometimes there's extra details that I need to know on top of that, and trying to learn two different sets of information at once is so difficult when the amount of information that you need to know in medical school is already astronomical. It's so easy to get burnt out in medical school, and studying for boards early is definitely one of the ways that that can happen. So like I said, I would recommend not stressing about COMLEX or USMLE Step 1 too much in the beginning, and just review old information as you go and trust that the administration is doing their job in preparing you for boards. And then when you get to maybe, I would say probably December or November of your second year, that's when you should really start making a plan on how you're going to approach these exams and studying more. Not necessarily your dedicated study period, but studying more aggressively for those exams. And of course, this is all subjective because that's based on my experience as a 2/3 of the way done first-year medical student, as well as the advice that I've heard from second years, third years, and fourth years. That's generally the consensus that I get from them. So yeah, those are my stress management techniques. They've worked really well for me in particular in medical school, and honestly, I really only feel stressed when I have big exams coming up, and it's not nearly as stressed as I was in undergrad, so I think that these healthy stress coping mechanisms have helped me a lot. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know if you have recommendations on what I should film next, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.